The quiet whisper. The night was calm, but the air carried a strange tension, like something unseen was about to happen. Cameras flashed in the distance, voices echoed across the street, and yet in the middle of that noisy world, Keanu Reeves stood still. He had always been known for his calm nature, for his ability to stay grounded even when the world rushed around him. But this night was different. This night was going to change something deep inside him. Sandra Bullock walked slowly toward him. Her steps were careful, her expression soft but filled with something heavy. Her eyes carried a storm, but also a quiet light that seemed to fight its way through the sadness. She paused for a moment, as if unsure whether she should speak. Keanu noticed the way her hands trembled, the way her breath slowed, almost as if she was carrying a weight too strong for one heart to bear. The first hook begins here. In that silence between them, viewers are drawn to wonder what she would say, why her eyes were wet, and why Keanu, who had faced so many storms in life, suddenly looked uncertain. Sandra leaned closer. The crowd faded. The flashing lights blurred. For Keanu, it felt as though the whole world had stopped breathing. Her voice was so soft that only he could hear it. Yet those words pressed against his soul like fire. "Keanu," she whispered, "I don't know how much longer I can hold this inside." In that instant, everything changed. Keanu's calm expression shifted slightly, a mix of surprise and deep concern. He didn't ask her to explain right away. Instead, he looked at her with kindness, the kind of patience only a man who had known pain could show. He waited. Sandra's voice shook. "For years we worked side by side, laughed together, shared stories, and people thought we moved on. But I never told you the truth. I never told you what I really felt. I was afraid. Afraid of ruining everything. Afraid of losing you even as a friend. But carrying this secret has been harder than any role I ever played. And tonight I just can't keep it anymore." The hook tightens here, pulling the audience deeper. Her confession isn't complete yet, and the suspense of what she truly means keeps the viewer listening. Keanu took a slow breath. He didn't interrupt. His silence was powerful, respectful. The kind of silence that tells someone you are ready to hear their heart. "You changed me," Sandra continued. "You showed me that kindness is not weakness, that strength is quiet, that respect is more powerful than fame. Every time I saw you give up your seat for someone else, every time you stepped back to let others shine, I felt something grow inside me. And yet I never said it. I never told you what I held in my heart." She paused, tears forming at the edge of her eyes. The crowd behind them still tried to capture their pictures, but neither of them cared anymore. This was no longer about Hollywood or lights or cameras. This was about truth. Keanu finally spoke, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Sandra, you don't have to carry that pain alone. You don't have to hide what you feel. Not from me." The words were simple, but they broke the wall she had built for so long. She closed her eyes, and a tear slid down her face. In that moment, there was no stage, no script, no audience. Just two people, bound by a history of unspoken emotions and unshared truths. And then, with all the courage she had, Sandra leaned even closer and whispered something that would change not just their bond, but the way they saw life itself. The weight of silence, Keanu stood frozen, his heart heavy with the weight of her whispered words. For years, he had carried his own silence, a quiet respect for Sandra, never daring to cross the line between friendship and something deeper. Now her confession had cracked open a door he never thought would open. He wanted to respond, but his voice caught in his chest. Sandra stepped back slightly, her eyes searching his face. She was afraid of what she might see, fear, rejection, or maybe regret. The silence stretched between them like a fragile thread ready to snap. The flashing lights of the paparazzi still burst behind them, but in their world, it felt like the whole crowd was far away, blurred into shadows. "Say something." "Keanu," Sandra whispered, almost pleading. "Don't let me stand here alone after telling you this." His eyes softened, but his lips trembled with words he wasn't sure he should release. For so long, he had hidden behind his calm nature, protecting not just himself, but the people he cared about. He knew the world could be cruel, and Hollywood even crueler. One wrong word, one wrong choice could destroy everything they had built together. He finally managed to speak. Sandra, you have no idea how many times I wanted to say something to you, too. But I didn't. I thought you deserved more than my chaos. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could at least protect the bond we had. But now, hearing this from you, I don't know if I can stay silent anymore. Sandra's breath caught. Her eyes widened. You mean, you felt the same? Keanu looked down, almost ashamed, then raised his gaze to meet hers again. From the very beginning. But life kept teaching me to hold back. After all the loss I went through, after all the nights I sat alone, I promised myself I wouldn't let my heart create more pain. I thought being silent was safer. But now I see maybe I was wrong. Those words cut through Sandra like lightning. She had always sensed something unspoken in his eyes, in the way he lingered just a little longer in their conversations, in the way his smile softened when she walked into the room. But hearing him admit it aloud was different. It was real, it was raw, and it was terrifying. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the waiting. It wasn't the fear. It was the silence. Every time I hoped you would say something, every time I thought maybe tonight you'll tell me, I went home with my heart aching. I smiled for the cameras, laughed for the interviews, but inside I felt empty, because I was carrying something I could not share with the one person I trusted the most. Keanu's hands tightened into fists at his side. He hated the idea that his silence had caused her pain. He had always believed silence was a form of protection, but now he saw the damage it left. He lifted his hand slightly, almost reaching for hers, but he stopped midway. He didn't want to rush. He didn't want to break this fragile moment. Then, something unexpected happened. From the corner of the crowd, a voice shouted, "Look at them! Something's happening!" The paparazzi cameras flared brighter, desperate to capture every angle. The world had noticed. Sandra flinched, reality crashing back in. She turned her face slightly away, trying to hide her tears. Keanu stepped closer, blocking her from the direct line of flashing cameras. He didn't say anything, but his actions spoke louder than words. He shielded her, even in that storm. Her heart swelled with gratitude, but also fear. Keanu, what if this goes public? What if they twist everything? You know how they are. They'll make stories, they'll tear us apart before we even have a chance to understand what this is. He nodded slowly, his voice low and calm. I know, but Sandra, sometimes the truth is stronger than the noise. Sometimes the truth is the only thing that can survive the storm. Her tears spilled, not just from fear, but from the overwhelming relief of finally letting go of what she had carried for so long. She leaned closer again, whispering with trembling lips. Then promise me. No matter what happens, no matter what they say, we will not let them take this away from us. Keanu's eyes locked onto hers, steady and unwavering. I promise. The words were soft, but they carried the strength of a vow. In that fragile yet powerful moment, the two of them stood together, their hearts exposed, their bond shifting into something deeper than friendship. But they both knew the road ahead would not be easy. Hollywood was waiting. The cameras were already spinning their story. The question was, would they have the strength to face it together? The storm behind the lights, the noise outside grew wild. Reporters shouted questions, their voices sharp and eager, like wolves circling in the dark. Cameras flashed so hard that the night sky seemed to glow white every few seconds. Still, Sandra and Keanu stood close, trying to hold on to the fragile truth they had just shared. Keanu leaned toward her, his voice steady but low. We need to get out of here. This isn't the place for something so real. Sandra nodded, though her heart raced. She could already imagine tomorrow's headlines, the endless speculation, the twisted stories that would spread like wildfire. She feared the world would turn something so delicate into a circus. Their driver pulled up quickly, and Keanu guided her into the car. The doors shut, muting the chaos outside, but the silence inside the car was even heavier. Sandra pressed her hands together, staring at the city lights rushing by the window. Keanu finally broke the silence. Sandra, I'm not afraid of what they'll say about me. I've lived long enough to know their voices fade, but I am afraid of how this will hurt you. You've carried enough already. She turned, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Don't you see, Keanu? I've been hurting for years. Hiding my heart was the real pain. Tonight I finally spoke. And even though I'm terrified, I feel lighter, like I can finally breathe. Keanu watched her closely. He could see the strength in her words, but also the fear trembling beneath them. He had always admired her resilience, the way she carried herself with grace even under pressure. But this was different. This was raw, unguarded Sandra, and it made his chest tighten with both pride and sorrow. The car slowed as they reached a quiet side street. Keanu asked the driver to stop, then turned to Sandra. "Come with me," he said softly. They stepped out into the stillness of the night. No flashing cameras here, no shouting voices. Just the hum of the city in the distance and the faint glow of street lamps. Keanu led her to a small bench near a row of trees. They sat in silence for a moment, the cool air wrapping around them. Then Sandra whispered, "I was so scared of this moment. I thought if you didn't feel the same, I would lose you forever." Keanu's hand moved closer to hers, brushing lightly against her fingers. "You could never lose me." "Not then, not now." Her heart swelled, but a new fear crept in. What if this changes everything? What if we can't go back to what we had? Keanu looked at her with quiet certainty. "Maybe we're not supposed to go back. Maybe we're meant to move forward." The words lingered in the air, pulling her into a silence she could not escape. Forward. The idea both frightened and excited her. She had spent so many years trapped between friendship and something more, never daring to step across that invisible line. And now, Keanu was telling her it was time. Just as she gathered the courage to answer, her phone buzzed loudly in her pocket. She froze, her heart dropping. She pulled it out and saw dozens of notifications already filling her screen. Headlines, pictures, videos, messages from friends and strangers. The world had already seen them together, already begun spinning its stories. Her hands shook as she showed Keanu. "It's everywhere." He took the phone gently from her, scanned the screen, then set it face down on the bench. "Let them talk. They don't know us. They don't know the truth of what we share." But Sandra shook her head, tears finally spilling. "You don't understand. They'll twist it. They'll use it against me. My career, my image, everything I worked for can fall apart in one night. You've always been stronger than me in this. You can stay silent. You can let the world say what it wants. But me? I'm terrified." Keanu reached for her hands and held them firmly. "You don't have to fight alone anymore. I've seen what silence has done to us, to you. I won't let fear control this. If the world wants a story, let them. We'll write our own." His voice was calm, but underneath it was a fire she hadn't heard in him before. Sandra looked at him, her tears slowing, her breath unsteady. "And what if writing our story breaks us?" Keanu gave a small, almost sad smile. "Then at least it will be real. Not a shadow, not a secret. Real." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had dreamed of this moment for years. But now that it was here, it came with storms she hadn't prepared for. She wanted to be brave. She wanted to believe. But deep inside, she wondered if love could survive the weight of fame, the cruelty of strangers, and the sharpness of lies. A cold wind swept through the street, carrying with it the distant sound of laughter from a group of people nearby. Sandra shivered, but not from the cold. She leaned closer to Keanu, her voice breaking. "Promise me, whatever comes next, you won't walk away." He squeezed her hands tighter, his gaze never leaving hers. "I promise." The night grew darker, but between them, a fragile light began to shine. It was the light of truth, of a bond no longer hidden. Yet both of them knew the storm was only beginning. Breaking shadows the morning after was not gentle. Sandra woke to the glow of her phone lighting up the dark room. Messages poured in endlessly. Calls from agents, emails from studios, texts from friends, and countless headlines screaming her name alongside Keanu's. Every article had its own story, its own twist, most of them cruel. Some painted her as desperate, others hinted at scandal. None of them spoke the truth. She sat on the edge of her bed, her body heavy with dread. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the chaos. A single thought circled in her mind. Is this how it ends for me? Her phone buzzed again, this time a familiar name. It was Keanu. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen, then answered. His voice came calm, steady, as if the noise of the world couldn't touch him. "Sandra, don't read all that," he said gently. "They feed on lies. Don't let them feed on you." She tried to speak, but her voice broke. "Keanu, they're destroying me. Everything I've worked for is being turned into gossip. I don't know how to stand against this." There was a pause on the other end. Then his voice came firm, like a quiet anchor in the storm. "Then let me stand with you. Don't carry this alone." Her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to let him in, to lean on him the way she had never dared to before. But another part whispered fear, that she would drag him down, too. Later that day, they met in a quiet cafe far from the city's center. Keanu had chosen it carefully, knowing Sandra needed space away from the flashing cameras. They sat in a corner booth, steam rising from untouched coffee cups between them. Sandra lowered her eyes. "I keep asking myself, was it a mistake to say what I said that night? Maybe I should have stayed silent. Maybe we should have kept pretending." Keanu shook his head slowly. "Silence doesn't protect, Sandra. It only delays the pain. You were brave. You spoke your heart. Don't ever call that a mistake." Her eyes glistened. "Bravery doesn't feel this heavy. Bravery doesn't feel like your life is slipping out of your hands." Keanu leaned forward, his voice softer now. "Bravery often feels heavy, because it means carrying truth when the world would rather you lie. It means walking through fire, knowing you might get burned. But Sandra, the weight is lighter when you don't walk alone." Her tears finally fell. She reached for her cup just to hide the trembling of her hands. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." Keanu's gaze didn't leave her. "Then let me be strong for both of us." Those words struck her heart. She remembered the years they had worked together, the quiet moments on set when his calm presence gave her courage, the laughter they shared that felt more real than anything else in Hollywood. Maybe she had always drawn her strength from him without realizing it. Just as she began to relax into his words, her phone buzzed again. This time it was her agent. She ignored it, but Keanu noticed her hesitation. "You should answer," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I already know what they'll say. They'll tell me to deny everything, to distance myself from you, to fix my image." Keanu frowned. "And will you?" She looked at him, torn apart inside. "I don't want to, but I'm scared. Scared of losing everything." His voice deepened with quiet intensity. "What is everything, Sandra? Is it awards, scripts, red carpets? Or is it truth, love, and peace? Because one of those is forever. The other fades." His words hit her like a mirror, forcing her to look at what she valued most. For years, she had been taught to protect her image, her career, her reputation. But what was the point if her heart remained empty? Their conversation was cut short when two young fans spotted them from across the cafe. Whispers began. Then phones were lifted, cameras pointed. Sandra froze, panic rushing back into her chest. Keanu noticed instantly. Without a word, he slid out of the booth, moved between her and the cameras, and gave the fans a kind nod, asking them softly for privacy. The fans lowered their phones, surprised by his calm but respectful request. They backed away, whispering apologies. Sandra stared at him, her heart swelling. It wasn't just what he said, but how he always acted, protecting her quietly with kindness, never with force. She whispered, "You always do that. You always shield me." He sat back down, his expression gentle. "Because you deserve it. Because no one should face storms alone." The cafe grew quiet again, but Sandra's heart raced faster. For the first time, she began to see a new truth, not about Keanu, but about herself. She had spent so long believing she was strong only when she stood alone. Now she realized strength could also mean letting someone stand beside you. But before she could say it aloud, her phone buzzed again. And this time, the message that lit her screen froze her blood. It wasn't from her agent. It was from someone she never expected. The unexpected messages. Sandra stared at the phone in her hand, her fingers stiff, her breath caught halfway in her throat. The name on the screen was one she had not seen in years. It was from someone who once meant everything to her. Someone who had the power to bring back old wounds she thought had healed. Keanu noticed her sudden stillness. "Who is it?" he asked gently. She couldn't answer at first. Her lips trembled as she turned the phone toward him. The name glowed bright against the dark screen. It was from her ex-husband. Keanu's brow furrowed, but he stayed calm. What did he say? Sandra hesitated, then opened the message. The words burned into her eyes. Sandra, I saw the news. Don't make a fool of yourself again. Hollywood will eat you alive. Trust me, you're heading for disaster. Her heart sank. All the years of struggle, all the quiet scars she carried from that broken marriage, came rushing back in a single wave. She felt small again, like the woman who once cried herself to sleep, doubting if she was strong enough to stand on her own. Keanu reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Don't let his voice inside you again. You've come too far to let the past chain you. Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. It's not just him. It's everyone. Every voice I hear tells me I'm wrong, that I'll destroy myself if I follow this. Part of me wonders if they're right. Keanu's gaze didn't falter. They're wrong, because they don't see you the way I do. They don't know the weight you've carried. They don't know the strength behind your smile, and they will never understand the heart you've just shown me. His words pressed against her heart, breaking through the fog of doubt, but still the fear gnawed at her. What if I'm not enough, Keanu? What if I fail and I take you down with me? He leaned closer, his voice low, steady, unshakable. Then let me fall with you. Because I would rather fall beside you in truth than stand alone in silence. Her chest tightened. She had never heard words like that before. Words that did not try to fix her, did not try to judge her, but simply chose her, no matter the cost. Still, the fear lingered. She pulled her hands away, pressing them against her face. You don't understand what it's like to be torn apart in public. They'll make me a joke. They'll twist me into someone I'm not. I can already see it coming. Keanu's voice deepened, carrying both pain and conviction. You think I don't understand? Sandra, I've lived in silence most of my life. I've been judged for what I didn't say, for what I didn't do. I've seen lies spread, and I chose to stay quiet because I thought it was easier. But silence is not freedom. Silence is a prison, and I won't let you lock yourself there again. Her tears spilled freely now. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust his strength. But the shadow of her past, the harshness of her present, and the uncertainty of her future all clashed inside her heart. She whispered, I'm scared, Keanu. I'm scared of losing everything. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with quiet fire. Then let's not focus on what we might lose. Let's focus on what we might build. Those words lingered in the air like a spark, igniting something inside her she thought was gone. Hope. Their moment was interrupted again by the sound of footsteps approaching their booth. Sandra stiffened, expecting another fan or a reporter. But instead, it was someone she recognized. A friend from years ago, a trusted co-star who had once shared scenes with her on the big screen. The friend leaned in, speaking quietly but urgently. Sandra, Keanu, you should leave. They know you're here. The press is already waiting outside. Sandra's pulse quickened. Her hands shook as she looked to Keanu, searching for answers. He stood calmly, offering her his hand. Then we'll leave together. She hesitated, staring at his open hand. Taking it would mean stepping into the storm with him. No turning back. For years she had faced storms alone, but now, for the first time, she had a choice. Slowly, her fingers slid into his. His grip was firm, steady, reassuring. Together they stood, ready to face whatever waited outside. As they walked toward the door, Sandra's heart pounded. Flashes were already visible through the windows, voices rising louder. But for the first time, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt strength in the warmth of the hand she held, and yet deep inside she knew this was only the beginning. The storm outside the cafe was nothing compared to the storm about to rise in their lives. The vow of truth, the cafe door swung open, and a wall of flashing lights hit them instantly. Voices roared like thunder, each question sharp, each camera hungry. Reporters pushed forward, fans shouted their names, and the world seemed to close in on them. Sandra froze for a moment, her chest tightening, her breath short. But then she felt Keanu's hand squeeze hers, steady and calm. His eyes met hers, unshaken. And in that look, she found the strength to take the first step forward. Together, they moved into the storm. Questions came fast, cruel, desperate. Are you in love? Is this real or for attention? How long have you been hiding this? Sandra wanted to run, but Keanu stopped walking, pulling her gently to his side. He raised his free hand not in anger but in quiet command. His voice carried above the noise, calm but firm. She is more than your stories, he said softly. She is not here for your gossip. She is here because she is human, because she has a heart. Respect that, the crowd faltered. The cameras still clicked, but the frenzy dimmed, surprised by his tone. Sandra's heart swelled. No one had ever stood up for her like that, not with force, but with kindness. She realized then that the strength she had been searching for all along wasn't just in herself. It was in the bond they shared, the trust they had built, the truth they no longer hid. Later, when they finally reached the quiet of Keanu's home, the noise of the world still echoed in her mind. She sat down, her body trembling with exhaustion. Keanu brought her a glass of water and sat beside her. "Are you okay?" he asked. She looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what will happen next. Maybe I'll lose roles. Maybe I'll be torn apart by the press. But right now, sitting here with you, I don't care. Because for the first time I feel free." Keanu nodded, his expression soft but steady. Freedom always comes with a price. But truth is worth it. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was gentle, safe, healing. In the weeks that followed, the world did what it always did, created stories, spread rumors, argued endlessly. Some voices were cruel, others supportive, but through it all, Sandra and Keanu stayed together, never denying, never hiding, never letting the noise define them. They began to appear in public, not with grand announcements, but with quiet presence, walking hand in hand, sharing smiles that spoke louder than any headline. The world eventually grew tired of chasing their story, but those who saw them closely realized the truth. Theirs was not a show, not a scandal, but a bond built on years of trust, respect, and unspoken love finally brought into the light. One evening, far from the cameras, Sandra sat with Keanu under a quiet sky. The stars shimmered above and the air was calm. She turned to him, her voice tender. "Do you think we'll survive this?" "All of it." Keanu looked up at the stars, then back at her, his eyes shining with quiet certainty. "We won't just survive, Sandra. We'll grow, because storms don't break the strongest trees. They make their roots deeper." Her lips curved into a soft smile, tears shining in her eyes. "You always know how to find the right words." He shook his head gently. "Not the right words, just the truth." They sat in silence, hand in hand, the weight of the past finally lifting. For the first time in years, Sandra felt whole, and Keanu felt at peace. And though the world would keep spinning, filled with noise and shadows, they had chosen a different path, one of honesty, humility, kindness, and resilience. A path where love was not hidden, where silence was no longer a prison, and where two souls finally found freedom in each other.